I can kind of turn it over to the AL side of things. I'll go, in the same order you went. I'll go over to the AL West, kick it off. In the basement, we're gonna have the Oakland, Salt Lake City, Sacramento, North, California Athletics there. At the bottom, just, a franchise that's completely in flux, terrible ownership, don't even have, a home really to call, for themselves over the next few years yet. Looking around the roster, it's been a roster that's just, it's really been a long-term rebuild, and it's just been not moving at a pace that I think is really encouraging either. I think guys like Zach Geloff are interesting. Shea Langoliers, a catcher, has that kind of, next level upside, I think. Esteury Ruiz is stealing bases left and right. If you can get to 80 to 100 bags this year, that'd be huge. His hit tool isn't that great. With it, but Brent Rooker had a encouraging kind of late bloom season last year for the first half, and then kind of faded toward the end. So it's a checkered roster and needs a lot of work. The pitching staff, JP Sears looks competent, but still his numbers aren't really good enough. I'm kind of, I think Ken Waldichuk starts out on the injured list. It's just the best pitcher that I think they're coming with is Mason Miller, and it feels like he's, going to be a high leverage arm in their bullpen and not really the starting pitching prospect that I think they truly, want him to be. So I think that's kind of tough. And, Paul Blackburn's a veteran. He's okay, but it's just not enough. So they're in my cellar. Next, I got the Angels. You lose Shohei Ohtani. That's a huge blow, both to your pitching staff and, you're the middle of your order there. The replacements that they kind of brought in were mostly bullpen. I think the hitting, it's led by Mike Trout when he plays, but over the last few seasons, he's barely gotten over, 100, 120 games a year. Love the talent, but it just feels like injuries are kind of derailing his career. He's reminding me a lot of Albert Pujols and Ken Griffey Jr., and it's really sad. But it's just not something I can count on year in, year out. The next highest paid guy they got is Anthony Rendon, who's just a shell of himself for what he was in Washington. I mean, the whole offseason was kind of a joke with all of his commentary, and he's kind of been that way since he got to LA. But that's just another problem. Like, that just creates a lot of locker room issues, and there's going to be a disgruntled, core group in there that's actually trying hard, trying to make that push toward the playoffs. And you got a guy like that who's just not committed. That's kind of a cancer for your entire locker room. And yeah, man, I mean, go around the diamond. I think, they do have other kind of bright spots. Patrick Sandoval, is a competent starter. I think everyone's waiting for Reed Detmers to kind of take that next step as a starter too. They've got some stuff that they can, kind of look toward. Like Nolan Chanel at first base is interesting, but it's just not enough to really get me excited in a pretty competitive division. The Rangers, hopefully they get Corey Seager back by opening day. Marcus Semien is a complete stud at second base. He's consistent. He's in the lineup every day. Loved seeing Evan Carter last year in the playoffs, toward the end of the year, kind of being that on-base guy, great defender. Looks like Wyatt Langford might break the opening day club. He's been just amazing in spring training. He's one of the best prospects in baseball. I expect really big things from him right away. I mean, almost to the level of a Corbin Carroll. So I think he'll be great. Adolis Garcia, battling some injuries, but he may be back, at some point soon. I just think you go around from what they did to get into the World Series, win it all. They've got a lot of those pieces back, but some are hobbled. I know they're going to be without their first baseman Nate Lowe for a little bit. So little things like that. And then you look at the rotation. That's going to be the biggest thing that's got holes in it. No Scherzer, no DeGrom for quite a bit of time. I think Scherzer is on a June timeline. I think DeGrom's in an August one. The rest of the rotation, they signed Michael Lorenzen today, which is really a good boost. I think he is a middle of the rotation type of guy, but is it enough to compete with who I think are going to be the top two spots? And just frankly, I don't. And for that reason, I have them in the third place spot. But my second place spot, I've got the Seattle Mariners. This is a team that I think has the best pitching staff in all of baseball. Going through their 1 through 3, I don't think there's a lot of clubs that stack up the way that they do. With Castillo, Kirby, and Gilbert, and then they come at the back of the rotation with 2 younger prospects in Wu and Bryce Miller. They've also got Emerson Hancock that's like pushing for that 5-6 spot, kind of like that swingman type role. And then they just got a ton of high leverage arms in that bullpen. So they're pretty much like ironclad when it comes to pitching and what I think they'll do over the course of the year. But the one thing that I thought Seattle missed on was adding some more impact hitters. I mean, I feel like it was more subtraction than addition this year, and they didn't add like another bat or two that I think are really impactful bats. I mean, they made kind of like a lateral trade with bringing back Mitch Haniger. I think overall they got rid of Eugenio Suarez. They're going to replace him over at third base by Josh Rojas. I mean, I just don't think that's like a good enough answer. Jorge Polanco comes over at second base, who adds a little bit of the on base prowess that you kind of want for that team. But it feels like a lot of mediocre hitters, surrounding Julio Rodriguez, who's still in his own development. He still strikes out a ton, doesn't walk as much, but just definitely puts up his counting stats. But I would say, I think Seattle is all in this year. I think it's the type of club that, Jerry Dipoto will be aggressive at the deadline. He can maybe bring over a hitter or two to kind of supplement everything. And as long as that pitching staff stays healthy and keeps them in games, like they're going to be good, and they're going to be good enough to grab wild card spots. So I've got them at least going into the playoffs there. And then at the top, it's the Houston Astros. I mean, it's kind of boring and it's kind of like the same old thing, but it's so hard for me to look at that roster and not put them at the top because, they're going to start without Verlander, but they still come back with, Valdez, Javier, Hunter Brown had a pretty good year last year. They are a little bit thinner at the end of their rotation, so it's going to be interesting to see if JP France or Ronel Blanco can step up, before Verlander gets back, or McCullers or any of the other guys, maybe Urquidy. But the bullpen is lights out like it's always been. And then when I just look at that hitting lineup, like 1 through 9, there are not many holes. I think Jake Myers is probably my only exception in center field, but like you go around the diamond, Abreu probably is like in his twilight years at this point too. But looking at like Yanni Diaz kind of stepping up at catcher, and then you got Jordan, you got Tucker, you got Altuve, Bregman, even Jeremy Pena, like Chas McCormick had a good year last year. So they're kind of the cream for me. So I put them up at the first spot. But Wayne, I want to hear your reaction to the AL West standings.
Yeah, I got the same one. I got the same, the same order there, I think. But yeah, like I think the Rangers, you mentioned it. Just a lot of question marks, injuries. Obviously, was it worth it? I guess. Like, yeah, they won the World Series first time in franchise history, so that's great. But obviously now, they aren't able to sign like a Jordan Montgomery, right, which would have been great for the rotation. And I think he's still out. I think he's still kind of roaming around or something. So yeah, like maybe they just signed him, right? Like, hey, bro, like can you just get like a short-term deal or something like that? So, but yeah, like everything you mentioned, I'm pretty much in agreement there. In a way, I feel like this is like the most sure rankings of any of the divisions. I feel like just because you feel like, all right, the Athletics barrel, and then the bottom of the barrel there, and then the Angels kind of on the bottom of the barrel, but better than the Athletics. And then you have a team like the Rangers, who a lot of talent, but then there's a lot of missing pieces. So, and who knows if they're able to kind of persevere through all that throughout a long season. And then you got the Mariners too, who one of the best players in all of baseball, and Julio Rodriguez on the offensive side of the ball, have some potential bats to hit homers and get on base basically for Rodriguez to help bat him in, and obviously just create runs in general there. But obviously also one of the best pitching staffs in all of baseball, I think, 1 through 5. So a lot of great a lot of wins can just come from that, I think. And then some timely hitting there. I think like a Ty France, I think he kind of bounces back, I feel like. So a bat like that can definitely help Julio Rodriguez and that team, I think. And and then obviously the top of the division here, the Astros. I don't know when they're going to take like a step back. I don't know if it's this season. I don't think so. But yeah, they just have way too much talent. I feel like from their lineup, a decent pitching staff, not necessarily dominant. Like you were saying, like Verlander kind of coming in later, which totally makes sense. That's exactly what I think Chris Sale ought to be doing. So, yeah, overall, I think I agree with your analysis. And again, yeah, I feel like this is the most sure type of standings. Like if I were to parlay or bet on this, like I would. But yeah, this is I think is probably the most concrete divisional race here.
Gotcha.